there are a lot of Westerners who have that conditioning, even if they're not believers, if they're not, they don't have to be a believer, but they will still often have an experience where they see this being, this luminous being, and they interpret it later on, or even at the time, they interpret it as Jesus. But they also, I notice regularly that they also don't have a developed perspective to be able to interpret the experience from a 40,000-foot view. And interestingly enough, the entity in these near-death experiences, to hone in on one point, never ever identifies itself as Jesus. It's always the subjective interpretation of the person having the experience. So what you'll find is, and this is, I get into this in a lot of detail in the book that I'm writing. It's book 2, where the forces of the psyche, the collective unconscious, will manifest themselves as these different avatars and archetypes based on what the individual needs or will understand. And it's really, to a large extent, it's as simple as that, because otherwise it would not be constructive or need serving. It's like we get what we're capable of grasping at the time, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's so deep. I mean, that's my story. I call myself a Christian mystic. My when everything was in shambles, it wasn't that, because it works both ways, right? It's like there's a lot of people who like kind of go to Jesus or but they end up going to religion. You know what I'm saying? And then that messes everything up. That, hey, you can't do that, you can't do this, can't be friends with that person, can't listen to this music. And so for that's like crumbling all of their stuff that they have built up. But for like a lot of people who are hurting or having a hard time with the psyche, like what Jesus represents is light. You know what I'm saying? It's like the highest form of love, and that's what I call it, like love that became a person for me. So if I pray or if I invoke that name, I can say the same thing. I call upon the highest form of love that exists in the universe right now. Or I can just say I call upon Jesus. Like for me and my psyche, like we have these players, these, would you say avatars or archetypes, right, that embody this. And so Jesus would be the highest form of love. The devil is the epitome of darkness. And then there's entities and beings in between, angels and demons, right? And and those are archetypes. They're essences, right? And so again, what you believe shows itself to you. And if you believe that to be true, and if that is true, like if it really is, if Jesus really is out, I don't care what you call it, as long, and just like AA, the AA program, we don't care what you call it. You just have to believe that there is a God or a creator or the universe that loves you, that you can draw power from, and so it's like when you have these systems and archetypes in place, they can help people, right? Because I'm drawing this love from, and then people say because it's an external source and you're not really getting it, you're going outside of yourself or whatever. But all religions have like essentially something similar, right? These different tenets and stuff. And whether it's through like some form of hero's journey, right? We have the archetypes and this story that we're all, playing out. I believe that if this civilization, if life as we know it is deleted and starts over, I believe that these stories are going to come back. It's just like whether it's in the soul of man or whether it is the truth. If Jesus and God are sitting there watching, I think it's a little bit more deeper, and we've given them names and titles. And I'm cool with that. It still works. That's the thing. Like it works. This is the name. Or it's Baba G. Baba G appears to me. Hey, it works, man. Baba G sending you light and love. Hey, it's working, bro. You're holding your stuff together. Zeta Reticuli beings come to you every 7 days, and they're giving you knowledge and downloads of the 7 stars. It's working. Like whatever it is, it's with the becoming the archetype and understanding that it works. So, I deal with a lot of spiritual far out, just understanding, trying to explain this stuff, and people will, they laugh at Christianity or how simple or whatever or dogmatic that Christianity is or has become, and we're deeper than spirituality, maybe get into Hinduism or Mayan culture or whatever, but it's the archetype. We have to pick one. Like you got to pick one. If not, you're going to be these people. Hey man, I'm reincarnated as this. You got to have something that works. It's got to have practices. It's got to have something that helps you, have this routine, but I feel like what I do is a little bit of all of it. It's like if it's good, like I want to take the good stuff from every culture and get rid of the bad stuff. And maybe that is a form of my psychology of not wanting to deal with the darkness or bad. But if it works, it works. And I feel like that's even what this podcast is talking to people from every spectrum. And like, I'm picking their brain to see what's working. Oh, that works? You did it and it worked? Yeah, and it brought tremendous peace. Okay, I can try it at least, and see if it works for me. And I think that that's how we progress with this narrative of what's working. Okay, I'm not necessarily telling you that it's Jesus, but that's the archetype. I can use those words, and this is what it means to me. It triggers things in my psyche that allows me to connect, and not just me, but it's the religion of the day for now. And people, they relate to it or draw away from it, especially in the hippie new age movement. Oh, Jesus and religion? No, my father was a pastor. For some people, it's a trigger. They don't want nothing to do with you when they hear, even I've been using the term God. They hate that term. But I'm like doing the inner work too. It's like, okay, why are you upset with that term? Why does God offend you? Why can't you use it? Oh, because God represents the patriarchy, whatever. And I'm like, okay, let's get to the bottom and really understand that. So when it's coming, all of religion and our spiritual practices, like, I feel like you got to pick one. You do. When you join the Masons, you got to pick a religion. You can't come as just, hey, I'm just whatever. You have to pick a higher power. The Masons, AA, you got to have some type of, because they all have patriarchs. They all have archangels, and all of these people and things that represent different things. What do you feel about like that? Do you have one, or is it just open? I'm open too, but I understand like this isn't definite. I understand the power in my psyche and what it relates to for me and other people. What do you feel about the archetypes and having to pick one and having a spiritual practice? Because if not, then we're like, hey, this guy says 2 channel. This guy says don't channel. This guy says I'm talking to a demon. This guy says I'm talking to Jesus. And there's so much confusion and chaos when it comes to this stuff, which is part of the process though.
Yeah, and it's a good question. It's a fair point, and it's like what you just articulated was somebody who is externalized and not centered in themselves. So for me, like it's an interesting discussion. Like,
is that a bad thing though? Is I guess what I'm getting to, because if it's working, you know what I'm saying?
Well, having like a belief structure?
Having a structure. Yeah, and in other players. Archetypes. This is the Jesus which represents love. This is the devil. This is, Shiva that represents this. And this is, Vishnu who represents that. And they're all representations of the one, of this, of consciousness, of love, of God, of death, of hatred, of bigotry. They have people that they help us to stay away from that because that represents this, Yeah,
no, that's right. As long as you can understand that it is a representation, it is a symbol, it is something symbolic, and it represents a deeper force in the deeper layers of the psyche, your psyche, and the collective psyche, and the universe's psyche. There's nothing wrong with having kind of, that's what a belief structure does for someone. Is ideally it stabilizes their psychology and it stabilizes their personality, and it offers, a baseline framework that you can then develop the personality from within. And eventually what happens will be that maybe this life and maybe the afterlife and maybe, some other so-called reincarnation, they'll let that go and they'll use other tools to explore themselves, to get to know themselves better. Whereas a lot of people fall into the trap of, Jesus and the devil, these are these literal beings, and they have this model of, this really dualistic model, heaven and hell. If I'm a naughty boy, I'm going to hell. If I'm good, I'm going to heaven. Sit at the right hand of God and on the cloud and all this stuff. And it's like, heaven is not a geographical location, and hell is not either. And if you can't understand this stuff at a slightly deeper level than face value, superficial appearances, then you just, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's just the way things are. Everyone's at their own level of understanding and development. The challenge that I like to challenge people to always push ahead and strive to go another step deeper, understand a little bit better, understand from a higher perspective. Because as you do that, Perspective changes everything. Perspective really is everything, because ultimately the only reality, the only model of reality that makes any sense is a panpsychist model. In essence, the essence is the understanding that consciousness is the ground of reality. So therefore, everything is possible, everything can be manifested, everything can be experienced. But what actually serves you in your internal, maturation and growth as a self-realized being, like, are you taking the archetype of Jesus and externalizing it and turning it into this deity that you worship and is, greater than you, and he needs to save you from this concept of sin, which is completely made up? Or are you using it as, like some people do, which is as a guide, a model for you to aspire to and to become more like that, to embody those traits and be more, so-called Christ-like? That's useful. I mean, as long as you understand that it's a symbol, and that's something that it's fine to work with symbols. That's what we've been doing for hundreds of thousands of years, and nothing's really changed.